Now module 3 is to clean out the spores. What is a spore? A spore is like the seed for a fungus. Fungus grows, and particularly with some types of fungi, the little seeds develop at the top so the wind can come and blow the seed into the air and take it to the next landing point where it grows another fungus. Spores are particularly dangerous for our lungs. We can literally fill our lungs with spores very, very quickly. And some days here on the islands, I can actually smell the spores in the air. Usually when the wind is down, practically no wind, and you walk into some buildings or some areas and you can smell them in the air. They're just sitting there, floating around, waiting to find a place to grow. Well, they can grow in your lungs very easily. And if your immune system is off and they find a little plantation to live in your lungs, then you will start to grow the fungus in your lungs. Now, a lot of medical thinking says it's not possible. It says that even if that happened, it wouldn't last very long because, the chemistry of your lungs and your immune system would find it and break it down and so on. Well, in fact, they're wrong because a lot of people have problems with respiratory issues. And it's largely because they have spores of various types sitting in the tissues that may not be growing until there's a certain circumstance, either energetic change in the person or maybe a temperature change or something like that, where when the right condition exists, boom, they start to grow. Now, even if they don't complete their growth, the fact that they start putting roots into the tissues interferes with the tissues, and then you have to kill them off. And then killing them off produces more toxins, so you have this ongoing problem. There's a way of stimulating the nervous system to recognize these as soon as they go into the respiratory channel, into the nose or through the mouth. You can identify this very, very quickly. The check for this is the rib heads on rib 4. Right? If we have a look at the illustration, see the spores check and balance is in this place. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4th rib, and where the rib attaches to the sternum, right, is called the rib head. Right? The rib has a sort of a little bit of a bump on the end, that's called the head. So if you touch these 2 points and you hold these points for about 30 to 60 seconds, you're waking up the brain's awareness as to whether there are spores in the system or not. Now, this doesn't just relate to the lungs. This can relate to anywhere in your body where spores may be, but it first looks at the existence of spores in the lungs, because that's where we get them most often. But if it doesn't find anything there, it will then go through the rest of your nervous system and find where else they may be. So you just hold the rib heads for about 30 seconds or more. Then the solution to that is actually to rub these rib heads for 30 seconds on both sides. So you touch for 30 seconds, then you rub. Right? That does the rebalancing. So it wakes up the nervous system to changing the response to the spores. You want to bring your spore points out? Okay, so the 4th rib, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4th rib head, right here. So she just touches down a bit. Down, on that rib. That's it. And it's right on the rib. It's not between them. Quite often a lot of these things are points that are between the ribs. These are right on the ribs where they attach to the sternum. So she holds them down a bit. On the rib, beautiful, and rub. And she rubs them. Now, it's a good firm rub. You're actually trying to move the rib head a little bit against the joint of the sternum, because that's what sends the signal off to the brain to pay attention to spores. It's going to be paying attention to other things as well, but for the sake of what we're doing here, we're only interested in its spore connections, which can be systemic. People who have systemic lymphitis, that is inflammation of the lymphatic system, often their lymphatic system is full of spores and funguses and yeasts. That's where they're growing. So one of the things that they need to do is to rub these points. And this is a really good thing to do if you're in an environment like here where you have lots of funguses and molds and things around, where you could be breathing in their seeds. This will work equally well for those things. Great. Thanks, Alan. Okay. That's our spores module. Now, spores will grow into funguses. The response that we have to molds and yeast is the same. It's practically the same. So, funguses are slightly different structure than a yeast. A yeast tends to be more like a latticework, a network of connections, where a fungus tends to be more like a normal plant with a stem and a head. So in the next module, number 4, for yeasts and funguses, we're actually dealing with the range from fungus all the way through molds, all the way through to yeasts, and with that whole variance in the structure of these things. They all require the same type of environment to live, but they just have different structures. So to challenge this, you hold the knife edge of the hands directly on the nipple line over the lower part of the rib cage for 30 seconds. So if you have a look here, we're in the nipple line, but we're holding on the lower part of the rib cage, right, all the way down to the bottom ribs, right, in that area. Right, now, it varies a little bit. You might, usually your hand width is the right length to cover the whole of this reflex point. Right, so if you put the base of your hand at the bottom of the ribs in line with the nipple, the rest of the hand will actually cover the reflex for these yeasts and funguses. You hold that there for, again, about 30 seconds. Right? You can do it more if you know that you have yeast infections, or you have maybe, you have problems in the summer, particularly when it's a bit moist, when it's humid. You find it hard to breathe, you have low energy, you don't feel hungry, and then you do feel hungry when it's cooler. That's usually an indication that you've got some funguses or yeasts in there that are, while it's hot and warm, they're growing, and then they want some more food. So when you cool down, when it cools down and you're hungry, you're actually feeding the new colony of yeasts. Isn't that fun? So, in this case, after having held this point, we go across to this area over here, the other chart, and we see that we tap the vertebra T3 over here and follow it down to T9. All right, this is at tapping points, again on the 3 phases of respiration. Let's have our volunteer out. I just volunteered her. Okay, so if you want to hold the bottom part in the line of the nipple a little bit further out. Good. A little bit further out, this way. Okay. Okay, just checking. So she holds that there for about 30 to 60 seconds, waking up the brain's awareness of the existence of these things. It's scanning through her body to see where these things are. Right? So whether it's vaginally, digestively, in the lungs, other organs, it's working out where these things are, and that's why you hold these for this period of time. Now, we turn her around. Right, here. Right. You don't have to keep holding for this. Once you've done the positions, the brain's now activated its awareness. So the first bump down is C7. Then we've got 1, 2, 3. Tap this point. Take a big breath in and out. Good. You want firm tapping, not too hard that you're knocking the person around, but firm so they can really feel it, obviously. T9, at the base of the scapula, is 7, then 8, then 9. And we tap T9, big breath in and out. Great, good. Turn around. So the initial reflex wakes up the brain's attention to the existence of the yeasts and funguses and molds as well. And then tapping T3 and T9 brings the attention of the nervous system as to what it should do about that problem. So you're basically training the nervous system to, hey, that's what you have to do with these things, go ahead and do it. And after you've tapped them on the 3 phases, they'll start to clean out the funguses and molds and yeasts out of the organs and cavities in the body of where they're found. So sometimes after having done that, the person will actually need to go to the toilet. Sometimes straight away if they've got really big overgrowth of yeast and so on, and sometimes within the next 15-30 minutes. But they will at some point need to go to the toilet to clean out the dead bodies, if you like. Great.
Excuse me, I have to go to the toilet.
Oh, okay, off you go. Don't go too far, we've got another module to do. All right. The last module here, number 5, is our friend the parasites. Friend, very fictitiously speaking. There are 2 areas where these parasites tend to accumulate more than anywhere else. That's the large and the small intestine. I was reading up about tapeworms because after seeing the video of them catching that tapeworm, I was fascinated. Just amazed, really. So I was reading some information about the tapeworms, and the tapeworms actually live in the gut. They're an intestinal infestation. So to have one big enough to travel up the gut, through the stomach, up the esophagus to come out the mouth is really quite amazing. What was even more amazing was that with further reading, I found that they can do the same thing anally as they did orally. I'm glad we didn't have that video, but it actually works faster. But the really big ones, they actually get them to travel further so that they'll disconnect all of their connections. Because the big ones can stay connected at the end of the worm and still have enough length to go off and, get the food. So they actually encourage the worm to come out the mouth because it has to let go of all of its attachments to do that, and so that's how they can remove the whole worm. But sometimes if they do it anally and it's a real big worm, the bottom half of the worm stays attached. So when they're winding it out, it breaks halfway and they think, oh, I've got a big worm, but the other half is still in there. Oh boy, interesting. But there are so many worms and types of different worms that we can have, so many different types of parasites that are not worms. There are other sorts of parasites as well. But most of them will find the toxic areas in your gut and they feed on those toxins because they like to eat that stuff. Right? Now, initially that might actually be helping us. But if they don't leave when they've finished eating all the garbage, then they start to eat our own food. And then they produce their own toxins, and so we end up with another problem. So if you I'll read through this first. You first hold the points for large intestine parasites for 30 seconds. You rub the 4 points surrounding L3 vertebra for 30 seconds. And this vertebra L3, the top corner, bottom corner, and the opposite top corner and bottom corner are the points that you rub. So you're rubbing like the surrounding area of L3. You then hold the points for the small intestine parasites for 30 seconds, and then you rub the points 25 mil up and 75 mil out from the centre of L3 for about 30 seconds, and I'll show you where this is in the chart. These are not only for parasites. You will find a lot of detoxification will occur through the large and small intestine from working with these points. These points will remove non-living toxins out of the large and small intestine, as well as the living parasites and other little animals we get in there. Now, you've got to remember that these parasites go through a cycle of events. We'll say they lay eggs. They're not actually, but we'll say they lay eggs, and the eggs go through up to 5 different stages of development. So to be able to get all of these things, you actually need to repeat this same process every 6 days for about a month is the best thing, the best time frame to cover them. Particularly with children who are playing outside in the dirt and putting dirty things in their mouth and stuff like that, they're more likely to pick up the larvae and the eggs of these parasites and have them re-establish. So if you do this like every week for a month with children, you've got a much better chance of removing the larvae and the eggs and the different stages that they're going through, so that as one set matures, it's removed, and then another set. And because if you're doing this on a regular basis, they don't have a chance to reproduce. Right, so you can eventually get to the end of all of these little cycles, so that then they're all gone and they don't come back. But if you just do it once, the person will probably actually function better for a week or so. But then once these other stages have matured, then the worms are back again. So you need to do this repeatedly for at least a month. And for people who are diagnosed with these, because that means that these parasites are producing certain types of disease patterns or imbalances, you may need to do this for maybe 2 months. And some of the exotic parasites that people get after having travelled to India or such places. In fact, one of my clients came back from Borneo, and she was so sick. She said she got dysentery in Borneo. Dysentery is just like diarrhoea that won't stop. Well, it still hadn't stopped 6 weeks later. She was dehydrated. She was going grey. Now, grey is a dead colour. When people are grey, they're going to die very soon. And she was going on grey. And I thought, there's something really wrong here. The only thing I could find was parasites in the small intestine. The only thing that showed up. So I thought, okay, I put her through this process. She went to the toilet. She was there for about half an hour. And she said, I didn't know I had that much stuff still in me. I said, well, that much stuff was probably alive. And getting it out of you was probably the best thing you've ever done in your life. Because when she came back, she had colour in her face again. I said, how do you feel? She says, I feel great. I feel alive again. I didn't realise how sick I was. Now, in that case, it was, I don't know what it was, but it was doing some very bad things to her small intestine. And it probably would have damaged her irreparably had she not got those things out of the system fast. In countries where they're used to this, they have much more awareness about it, and they're more likely to discover them earlier. Like if you go to a doctor in India, one of the first things he's going to check are parasites, worms, infestations, because they're all over the place. But she came from Borneo to Australia. In Australia, we don't have that problem. Well, not to the degree that they do in India, for example, or Borneo. So the doctors are not aware enough to look for that as a problem. They don't think worms are important. In Australia, they just pay no attention to them. Even in childhood diseases and problems, recurring fevers in children is usually abdominal parasites, intestinal parasites. Right? Clean out their intestines. Well, this is really one of the best ways that I've ever found to be able to do that. So if you have a look at the points on the front here, you have the large intestine points. These are the challenge points you hold for 30 seconds. If you run down the front part of your hips, you'll feel that it starts to drop away and go back into your body, right? At this lower part, that's where you have the reflex for the large intestines. So if you feel the front hip bone and feel down where the bottom is, and just run your fingers in over that, right? And hold in there, you've got your large intestine point. If you're not sure, use 3 fingers over the area so you're sure of, being able to get to the point properly. Hold that point for 30 to 60 seconds, and then you can go over to the L3, 1, 2, 3, and work on the L3 vertebra around the corners of the vertebra. So you're rubbing this top and bottom section, and there's some acupuncture points here on the bladder meridian that are specifically related to cleaning out the large intestine. So rubbing these points is going to stimulate the evacuation of toxic and parasitic activity in the large intestine. These 2 points here, L3. You go back to the front here, and you'll see that this is the pubic bone, right? And just a little bit out and up on either side of the pubic bone into the soft area, right? From the pubic bone out and up into the soft area of the intestines. Hold that area, and that will challenge any infestations in the small intestine. And that small intestine points. You go to the back, and if you just go straight out from the top of L3 and up a little bit, it's pretty much under the turn of the ribs on the back, so it's quite wide. It's a wide area from the centre, and rub there. Again, there's another bladder point out there, but in fact this is actually a reflex for the small intestines and will help to eliminate parasites and other greebly things that may be in the small intestines. Right? So this is a really great set of points for eliminating all sorts of parasitic, toxic materials where people have diverticular, where it's like little ballooning in the intestines. The toxicity that builds up in there can be removed eventually with consistent use of these points, right? Which is really a very helpful thing for those people to go through. So we have some small and large intestines over here, bringing themselves out. Thanks, Darwin. Okay, so rubbing the points for large intestine, the anterior superior iliac spine, that's the official name for it, but you just will the front hip bones, right? At the bottom part of that, just fall into the soft area, right? And quite often that's sensitive in there. If it's sensitive, it's usually an indication that the parasites have been, releasing toxins recently. So you hold the points, 30 to 60 seconds, holding. Brain's waking up. Good. Then we turn around. Now, L3 is the middle vertebra, right, between the sacrum and the base of the ribs. All right? So right in the middle is L3. All right? So if you rub the 4 corners around, and if you're not sure, just rub the whole area, and then the whole area on either side, or both together. right? And it stimulates the activity in the large intestine to remove whatever is living in there. All right? Then we turn around again and we do the small intestine. So you go to the pubic bone, you go out from the pubic bone and up into the soft area of the abdomen and just hold those points for 30 seconds. This is for the small intestine. In removing the toxins from the small intestine, people tend to have, or sometimes have, some cramping occurring because the small intestines are actually small and the curvatures within the intestine are much smaller, and so there's a little bit of cramping occurs sometimes to push things out. That's normal, that's okay, that's not a problem. If that continues with either the small intestine or the large intestine points, that means that the person is deficient in magnesium, because the intestines, particularly the large intestine, depend on magnesium to regulate the peristalsis. They don't have enough magnesium, the peristalsis contracts, but it doesn't let go. And the contracted areas means junk builds up on one side, and that's where you get your parasites living. So the contractions is actually pushing the junk through the intestines and making sure that more solid bits get moved better. That's okay, that's good, but that shouldn't continue for more than a day. If it continues for more than a day, the person needs magnesium. All right, so that's woken up the small intestine while we've been talking with ourselves. So you go to the middle vertebra again, up to the top corner, out and up, almost under the ribs, and you rub in these two areas. If you're not sure, just rub the whole area. Two together. And that will stimulate now the small intestine to remove the unwanted contents. Again, if you're helping somebody who knows that they have any sort of parasitic infections, do this when you have close access to the toilet. Because particularly in children, they work really fast. All right? So and you ask them, do you want to go to the toilet? Yes. Go now. Don't ask them a second time. Just send them away. Otherwise, you'll have to clean up the mess. All right, great. Thanks, Dylan. All right, so then the 5 modules that we have for eliminating the bugs, clean the body. We're going to, what have we got? 12, good. I'm going to go through a questions time now. If you have any questions on any of these modules. And I really, really want you to go through and practice all of these modules, even if you go through them a couple of times. It's really important to train your nervous system to get used to doing this. Especially if you or your clients are wanting to become pregnant. This is a really, really important first step. If a person is trying to get pregnant and can't, you must not eliminate the possibility of parasites, because the parasites create toxins that change their hormones and can easily stop them from conceiving. Easily, way too easily. So, we've had the experience where people have done this, who have been practicing to become pregnant, and nothing's happened, and they do this, and shortly afterwards, boom, they're pregnant. Well, you could say that's coincidence, but after doing this for this number of years, I'm quite convinced that there's no such thing as coincidence. So you have an opportunity to train your nervous system today to go through this. If you've done it once, go through the whole lot again. Right? Get the practice in. Get it really drummed into your nervous system, so that if you have infected food, or you have some way of getting, a new infestation, your subconscious already knows what to do about it. This does work for where you have infected food with bacteria or viruses or whatever else. Right? So if particularly bad food, which does happen on the islands, You can buy food here that's served to you under lots of sauce and stuff, and you don't know what's underneath there. I have had the worst dose of food poisoning in my life from eating a steak here from one of the restaurants, and I'll never forget it. Neither will Estefania. Because she was dragging the bed around to the bathroom so I could fall onto the mattress coming out of the bathroom so I could fall asleep. It was just horrible. It was the worst thing. But one of the things that will help to at least mobilize your immune system to work on those things is to do this many times. Build this in as a natural part, and it becomes like a prophylactic training for your nervous system for anything that could be getting inside you that shouldn't be there. The other thing that I've noticed too in some of the testimonials that have come back from people is that their yeast problems have stabilised. They don't have the candida anymore, they don't have the thrush, which is the yeast in the vagina and so on, and it doesn't seem to want to come back, because the more of this you do, the more training you give yourself, the easier it is for your subconscious to recognise the situation. It keeps the immune system on because you've practiced turning it on, and so your immune system will take care of it naturally. You don't even have to know that there was a problem. So if you're doing a lot of travelling, for example, it's really good to do this a few times, to get the training so that when you go to these other places and you're eating things that you're not used to, that you're not going to have a negative reaction to them. Right? So this does work for helping you to overcome bad food or infected food and so on, which you get in a lot of Asian countries. Well, you can get them anywhere. Yeah? So do it now, and you'll be guaranteed of having a happy holiday next time you go. All right? Good. So we're going to go through some questions then. Biliaris. Oh, biliaris. Oh, sorry. Yes, okay. Yes, any of those worms, any of that sort of infection can be trained to leave. You're training your nervous system to pay attention to these things. You see, these little parasites and things are not a part of your nervous system, and they actually produce substances to disguise their existence. Now, those substances are turning off the immune system. So the very first thing you do is going to turn the immune system back on, and that then means that the immune system is going to recognise that these things are trying to disguise their presence. Then you can do other things, and really the organs and the positions of where they are then start to expel these parasites and stuff. Some people can become very sick in the process of getting rid of these parasites, particularly the ones that get into the liver and into the pancreas, because they don't want to leave. They've spent a lot of time setting themselves up, and they can make you feel quite sick for a few days. If any illness continues for more than 3 days, then you need to see specifically what you need to do to change that. But for people who have complained that they feel ill after doing this, we just get them to do it again and again and again and again, and eventually it removes all the parasites, and then they feel okay. But while they're being asked to leave politely, they're fighting back because they don't want to leave. Right? But this will make them leave. So you just remind them by doing the process again. Remind them again, you're not welcome here anymore, get out. Right? And you're reminding them by just going through the process. You could combine this with energy lift to make sure that the lymphatic drainage is moving the toxic part away efficiently, because that's going to be very helpful. Because as these things are moving, some of them are going to be dying off. Well, hopefully most of them will be dying off. But when they die off, they break down into their component chemicals. And that's taken up by the blood and by the lymph. So if you did clear energy and you do energy lift in conjunction with this, usually the person has no problems at all. Well, there's two questions. The first one is, what's the difference between holding your hand this way or this way, is the angle. It's very difficult to get the angle right when you're doing this one, but it's much easier to get the 45 degree across. That's the only difference. If you're doing it with somebody else, then you can put your hands on the 45 and hold them there as well. The other question is, why the knife edge? The knife edge is a much more of a neutral challenge. So you're getting the response from the person more than the combination of you and the person. If you're touching your hand on the person, you have lots of receptors on the hand that have their own jobs to do. And that can be interfering with the type of response. So you just want and because the reflex itself is a very narrow area in this angle, you just want to challenge the person in that area and you not be involved. So the side of the hand and the thumb are the most neutral parts of your hand. If you try to do this with your thumb, it's difficult because you've got movement, and this doesn't respond to movement. It's a pressure reflex. So that's why the knife edge of the hand is preferable. You're not as involved and you're challenging more what's going on in the person in a more neutral way. And the question is, why isn't thymus more involved in this process? The thymus by itself does not regulate the immune system. The thymus and the hypothalamus regulate the immune system. Now, where have we covered the hypothalamus and the thymus? In balance the hormones process. So we don't actually need that in this, because this is part of the nervous system that specifically deals with what the nervous system does and what the immune system does with these sorts of entities. The thymus-hypothalamus axis has to do with how much energy is given to these processes. So you could balance your hormones with this if the person has a lack of energy, right? They have or maybe an autoimmune disease, right? Where you found that there are parasites involved, but because they have autoimmune, they're probably not going to have as much energy available to help their immune system. Actually, in the autoimmune system problems that people have, their immune system is off. And the control of what the immune system is doing is not there. So just turning the immune system on is enough for them to get back control of the immune system and actually start to rebalance their autoimmune problems. So you actually don't need thymus to do that. The only time you need thymus is where there is actually a distinct lack of energy. That is, they have an infection, you know it's there, but there's no symptoms. But then tapping the thymus is going to raise the energy in the immune system. That's going to make the symptoms, because then the war starts. Their immune system against the enemy. Right? But if they don't have enough energy to even start the war, then that's a thymus problem, because it's actually thymus-hypothalamus. The thymus is telling the hypothalamus, hey, we've got an infection going on, and then the hypothalamus determines how much energy is going to go towards helping that. If there's no energy there, they're not making any symptoms, they don't know they've got an infection. It's like the Trojan horse. The horse is brought in, everybody thinks it's a really nice thing, they go to sleep and all the little bugs come out during the night and destroy the city. Right? That's the thymus problem. So if you did the combination of the balance your hormones that has the hypothalamus and the thymus, or if you wanted to, you could just use the hypothalamus points while tapping. But I would do that after turning the immune system on, right? Because you want the energy to go into the immune system. If the immune system is off and you tap the thymus, where's it going to go to? That doesn't turn on the immune system. So it's more important to have the immune system on, because in most people the thymus is already active, but if the immune system is off, the activity of the thymus is wasted. There's nowhere to put the energy. So it's more important to have that immune system on, and then the thymus will do its job naturally anyway. So that's why we don't necessarily have to have it as a part of these modules. The question is, and it refers to the comments I made earlier, that when you clean out your body, right, the reason you have to clean it out is because there are perceptions or fears or concepts that you're holding that are creating the environment for these parasites and things to come into you. So how do we become aware of those things, the emotional, the mental, the conceptual fears, whatever? How do we become aware of those things to change them? That will happen naturally, because as you remove the bugs, you've got less energetic and perceptual distractions, and you're just going to become aware of the other side of the coin. You may actually be having fears about things but not recognizing them because they're masked by the chemicals produced by the parasites. You get rid of the parasites, the chemicals go, and then you recognize you've got a fear of work, or a fear of your partner, or a fear of plants, or a fear of fear, or whatever it is. But then you have the workshop being better than your fears. Bang, you can go straight for it. In fact, the order of doing clean body first and then going through being better than your fears is a really nice formula. Because even if you don't know what the environment is, that process will help to find it and, in most cases, remove it anyway. There's a lot of fear behind parasites and so on. It's actually the fear of dying. If you want to have a shortcut to it, it's a fear of dying. It's ironic because we actually bring in the parasites to eat up the stuff that would kill us, but in the process of doing that, we invite things into our bodies that will kill us. It's sort of like justifying having the fear, isn't it? Yes.
Second question is to say something about this.
Can I say something about tea tree oil? I'd love to say something about tea tree oil. Tea tree oil is one of my most favoured friends when it comes to killing off the bad guys in the gut and in the system generally. Tea tree oil has a really quite amazing ability to kill off the bad bacterias, but not the good ones. It's like a natural bad guy antibiotic. It kills them off selectively. It's almost intelligent in how well it can work. It can be used as a digestive cleaning. If you know you've eaten something bad, right? You've got the wind and the burnt and the pains and things, then just grab some tea tree oil, a few drops in a glass of water, and drink it. And drink it. I went to Singapore on a workshop, and the first day there, I thought, oh, now this is a foreign country, this is a bit, you have to be careful with the food. So I looked where all the locals were eating, and they were eating at this big canteen, this big cafeteria. So I thought, okay, I'll get something there. So I got something there, some pork or whatever it was. Oh, it was terrible. Within a couple of hours, it felt like I had swallowed razor blades, knives. They were cutting. It was really bad. So I went back to the hotel just in time, literally just in time, and I spent more time on the toilet than off. And I was balancing and rubbing points and tapping acupuncture points and praying and doing all sorts of things, And I thought, after a couple of days of this, there's got to be a remedy somewhere. So I muscle checked on a map of Singapore for where the remedy would be for this amazing diarrhea. So I checked, and it was in the same block, the same area that the hotel was in. Great. So I'm muscle checking, and I found it's the same building. Oh, great. It's in the same building. Great. I don't have to go far because that's always a plus. And it's on the same floor. I'm thinking, what? Well, there's only rooms here. So I checked for which room. It was my room. I go, oh, come on. So I checked in the room. It was in my suitcase. I said, but there's nothing there but clothes. So I opened it up, and sure enough, in one of the pockets in the suitcase was a little bottle of tea tree oil. That was the solution. Now, up to that stage, I had never drunk tea tree oil, but in muscle checking, I found that's what I had to do. So I'm going to drink that stuff. It's like, Well, anyway, I found out a few drops in a glass of water, swished it down. Oh, that's strong. Especially the first time you have tea tree oil, you're not used to it, so it's a little bit of a surprise. Half an hour later, the pain had dropped to half. I had another dose, like an hour later from the first one, and probably an hour and a half after taking the first dose, the diarrhea had stopped, the pain was gone, and it felt safe to actually leave the room. It was really bad because trying to sit in a classroom while you've got knives running around, your intestines, and you're just wondering when the next run has to be to the toilet, you're really not paying much attention to what's being said, So at least I got the last couple of days of the workshop into my brain instead of out through my bowels. But the tea tree oil saved my life. It was amazing. Since that time, whenever I've had, problems with intestines or other people, I say, just drink some tea tree oil. One of the students in the Netherlands drinks it every day, just as a prophylactic. She has no bowel problems, she doesn't have any trouble with it, and yet written on the bottom or written on the bottle, right, is a warning not for oral consumption. Well, I traced that down, and it came to a point where some woman in America, I think it was America, had drunk a bottle of it, a whole bottle, right? And she got nausea from it. Well, of course, it's strong. You drink anything that strong, you're going to get nausea. And so she reported it to the doctor. The doctor put in this report, and so now they had to put a label on it saying, not for oral consumption. What do you want? The antiseptic that's in there to kill the bugs, or you want the bugs to be in there and make their own colony? Right? I'm going to drink the antiseptic. And that's the tea tree oil. It's great stuff. You can put it on infections, mosquito bites. Right? The irritation that comes from mosquito bites is from the proteins that they inject into you so that you won't stop the bleeding and stuff, so that they can actually digest your proteins and get the blood out easily. If you put tea tree oil on that, it neutralises the substance that the mosquitoes or fleas or ticks or any other insects put on you, and it's of no consequence anymore. The itch goes away. You can put it on your teeth for infected gums. Right? It'll literally penetrate into the gum tissue, and it'll kill off the abscesses. I wish I had known that when I was young, because I lost about 3 or 4 teeth to abscesses when I was young, and they were perfectly good teeth, just a tiny little abscess on the bottom, it was a real shame. There's a sinus in the back of your head called the mastoid sinus, and it's completely enclosed by bone, but sometimes that gets infected. There's only one formula that I know that can kill off the infection there and neutralise any toxic effect, and that's a combination of tea tree oil and garlic. You get garlic oil and tea tree oil, you put a poultice on there, it kills the infection and it sucks it through the bone. It'll suck it out of the sinus. That's pretty amazing. Tea tree oil can penetrate through bone. So it's a brilliant antiseptic. It seems just to be able to adapt to what you need for women's problems, and I suggest for women who have thrush to use, a sponge, right, with tea tree oil put in it, and just keep the sponge inside, because it acts as a constant supply of antiseptic and kills off the infections. Right? And it works really quite well. I mean, you can use it if you have a cut, cut skin or blisters or whatever. Put some tea tree oil on it. Yes, it's going to sting for a few minutes, but after that you have no infection, and it actually encourages the circulation and the healing of the tissues much faster. So yes, one of my favourites is tea tree oil, but use the 100% oil. Don't use the 15% or 10% diluted stuff. That's okay if you have a child who has ticks, not ticks, what do you call them? Lice, hair lice. They get them from school and all that sort of stuff. You wash their hair with 15% diluted tea tree oil, just in lightly soapy water, shampoo or whatever. Wash that through, leave it there for 10 minutes or so. Those lice can't stand it. It'll kill them off. The trouble with the lice infections is other children, or other parents actually, in not washing the children's hair properly. So tell them about tea tree oil, because it's really good stuff. What else about tea tree oil? Just about like any fungal infections, you can use tea tree oil in there to kill the fungus off. You need to keep using it for a while so it'll penetrate into the skin or the toes, where people get deformed toes because they've got a fungal infection in the toes. Use a tea tree oil regularly. They will probably lose the toenail, because the toenail is actually dead anyway. It only grows at the base. But that's where the source of the fungus is in the toenail. So the tea tree oil will get in there, kill off the fungus, and the toenail will drop off. But a new toenail will grow back, and it'll be perfectly fine. So it's great stuff. And so don't worry too much about what they say on the bottle about drinking it. I wouldn't drink it straight out of the bottle, but put a few drops into a glass of water and drink the glass of water, particularly for digestive stuff. Because just a few drops is really great for the digestive system, and it doesn't seem to hurt your own natural bacteria. In fact, it actually helps the balance between the yeast and the natural bacteria to go back to normal. So good old tea tree oil. It's always a good standby. Oh, there are lots of herbs that can help with the cleaning. Any herbal formula that they call a detox will help with cleaning out the effects of the parasites and stuff. Any of those formulas can help. And there's too many of them for me to want to have to go through. But just go to your health food shop that have detox formulas. Any of those things are going to work okay. Yeah, because you don't have to kill them off, because you've already done that. You just need a bit of a cleanse just to wash through. In fact, even just 2 days of just drinking water is as good as anything. Just pure water. You could add a little bit of lemon juice, or maybe a little bit of tea tree oil. Right? Works fine. The red marine algae is... this is part of the wall where you have live infestations. The red algae will get in there, and you're using it as a cannon. You're getting in there and you're killing off the bugs. That's a different thing than what this is doing. This is teaching your nervous system to actually change the environment that they live in. So then they die. If they're not in the environment that they live in, they die. Then you only need a cleansing process. Chlorophyll, for example, if you have intestinal worms and stuff, after you've done this a few times, take some chlorophyll and water. It's as good as any. If you still have the infections and stuff, then that's when you'd be having the red algae, because the red algae is actually another toxin. It's toxic to you, but it's also toxic to the bacteria and yeasts and stuff. But it's a toxin that we can break down easier than the parasites. So that's why they use the red algae. And yeah, it does work, but in fact that would be instead of this. Right? This is actually a much more efficient way of doing it, because you're changing the environment that they're attracted to. So they either leave or they die off. What happens with the people who drink the tea tree oil and they have stomach pain? They have too much tea tree oil. The only thing that the problem that we've had with tea tree oil is that it can make the person's stomach feel uncomfortable. Right? Either they're having too much, or it's because there are certain bacteria that can live in the stomach. Yeah, even with all that acid and stuff in there, they can live in the stomach, and they're very, very strong bacteria. Obviously, if they're swimming around in hydrochloric acid, they're pretty tough little characters. Well, the tea tree oil in that case is killing them off, but they don't want to die. So they're trying to bury themselves in the wall of the stomach to protect themselves, and that's why the person feels uncomfortable. Can you do something to prevent fleas from finding you? If you have animals that have fleas, obviously you're going to have to work on cleaning them up. I used to live in an apartment, and the woman next door had a little dog, just a little, I don't know, something. But he had fleas, and one time before I was going on a trip, he ran into my apartment, and I said, "Get out of here, get on, shoot," and he took off. Well, that 5-second entry left enough fleas in my apartment so that when I came back 2 weeks later, I was walking on black carpet that was alive. I'd take a step and my leg was black from all of these fleas that were attacking me. It's like, what happened? I had to get, a professional pest exterminator to come in and clean all these animals out of my apartment. I couldn't live in the place for 3 days because the poisons were in there. They were horrible. There are homeopathic preparations that if you take, the fleas will find you and think, "Ooh, you taste really bad," and they'll never come back again. But you actually have to check them individually. So one of the suggestions that we had from another student was to make an enoptic that people could use if they had animals and stuff that had fleas. Then you can use these for the animals so that the fleas won't come back as well. So we'll probably be making something like that in the future. But usually it's a matter of eliminating the source. All right? So if it's your own pets or whatever, or if you're in a situation where other people's pets are contaminating you, then you need to make them responsible for cleaning that up. But while you're going through the process of cleaning them up, there is, I believe, I haven't actually done this, but I believe that there are certain forms of incense that you can burn in your apartment, and the fleas and those sorts of little blood suckers don't like, so they won't come in. They'll go out. So that's the best we can do at the moment, but there probably will be an enoptic in the future for dealing with those sorts of problems. Also mosquitoes, so it'll cover mosquitoes, probably any bites from insects and stuff. Yeah. Can you use tea tree oils on babies from the first day? I would want to know more about where you would be using them. But if you used a highly diluted form, if you had to, yes. But really the child's immune system is encouraged by the mother. So if you thought that the child needed some sort of antiseptic work, give it to the mother, right? Because her breasts are really quite amazing at determining what the baby needs and what it doesn't need. And I don't know how it happens, actually. I don't know the mechanism. But when a woman is breastfeeding the baby, maybe Estefania knows this, but when the woman is breastfeeding a baby, she's monitoring that baby's needs by what it is, doing with the milk in its mouth. Literally, there are processes in the mouth of the baby that are pre-selecting what it's going to do with the breast milk. And the mother somehow is able to pick up on that, and she alters the breast milk to suit that situation. If the baby has an infection and the woman is given tea tree oil, she has the ability to put the tea tree oil into the breast milk in the right proportions. So for a very young baby, I wouldn't be using tea tree oil directly because I don't know enough about it. But if the baby's being breastfed, I'd give it to the mother And she and the baby together would work out what the best formula would be, if that's necessary. Because the immune system of the baby is really created from the breast milk of the mother. It's the most safest time of their whole life, because the breast milk from the mother is what builds the immune system. And in fact, it's the mother's immune system that's monitoring what's happening in the breast milk for the baby. She can tell by the smell of the poos of the baby what it needs and what it doesn't need, automatically. And her breast milk will change to suit that. Now, if a baby has continued diarrhea, I would be giving the mother tea tree oil, because she's not working it out, because probably she has the same infections. Take the mother through these modules and then see if the baby's diarrhea disappears. And it probably will. So again, you probably may not even need the tea tree oil. Yeah. So the question really is the immune system compromised in a baby if it's not breastfed? Yes, actually, that's true. Breastfed children have a much greater resilience to disease and outside things. Let's face it, the kids are eating all sorts of junk all the time. They're picking stuff off the ground, they're picking their nose, they're biting their fingers, they're really dirty little animals. So they have to have a very good, strong immune system to fight off the stuff that they collect. Children who are breastfed have so few problems, with their immune system compared to children who are not breastfed. But then you have the added problem of the children who are not breastfed are usually fed with cow-based products, which wrecks their digestive system for later on. So they have more of a problem with their immune system. So they develop allergies. There's lots involved in this, but really, children who are breastfed have a much stronger immune systems through their lifetime. They have the ability to absorb nutrition better if they're breastfed than if they're not. Not just because of the ability the breast milk has to help with that process, but also because that if they're not having breast milk, what else are they having? That gets to be a problem. So with that situation, you would take the baby through food is the best processes. The workshop food is the best, to make sure that the digestive system is actually brought up to scratch and can work, efficiently. Yeah. Yes. Interesting question. Would these modules be a substitute for the vaccinations, like a replacement, or I don't know about a substitute, because a vaccination has a very particular action. But what we've found was, like with Milena, for example, when they go through these processes and they go into these other countries where, they could be exposed to other things, that they haven't had any problem. But the people who have had the vaccinations still have the problems. So I'm not going to say yes or no to that, because it's a political hotcake. But from what we've seen happen is people go through these modules, they go to these countries where normally they could get all sorts of problems, and they don't. Jose was saying he went to Egypt, right? And he did this, a couple of months or so before you left, and he said he had no problems while he was there, because he's already been through the modules. The nervous system learns very fast if you teach it in a way that it understands, and that's what these modules are all about. So whether they would replace the vaccinations, I don't know. I think doing these, if you're courageous enough to do these and not have a vaccine and see what happens, and let us know what happens. Write down a testimonial and, send it in. Because, we're still learning about the effects of these ourselves. Yeah.
There is another aspect.
Okay, so the question then is, would these modules antidote the bad effects that a person would have from the vaccinations? Yes, probably it would. The vaccines are primarily foreign proteins that are put into your body that you will create antibodies to. The theory is that if you were going to get an infection that would have the similar form, you'd already have the antibodies for them, and so it would take less time for you to be able to react to the local infection. Well, this will do a lot of things. It'll reorganise the blood chemistry, it'll reorganise a lot of organ function, and from a poison point of view, it may be antidoting the ill effects of the vaccine straight away. Actually, the part of this that would antidote the ill effects of the vaccinations is the immune on, turning the immune system on. Because what we find is in most people, when they have a vaccination, it turns the immune system off. So just turn it back on again, and then it will discover what it has to do, whether make antibodies or to remove the proteins or whatever it's going to do, but it can't do its job efficiently if it's off. And the vaccinations almost always turn the immune system off. So just turn it back on again. You know, I was talking to someone in the aeroplane one time, because I do travel a little bit on aeroplanes, and she was talking about, you know, when she goes to this place she has diarrhea, she goes to that place she has stomach problems, she goes to this place she has... I said, well, you know, hold your chest here for 30 seconds and just push your pubic bone in. She looked at me and said, what are you talking about? So I had to, you know, backtrack and explain myself a bit better. And and so then she thought, oh, okay, so she tried it, right? Well, she's sitting next to me. I said, you know, hold here, there, that's good. Now breathe out, push your pubic bone. And the guy next door is going, reads the paper, you know. He didn't want to know anything of what was going on. And she said, oh, that feels different already. Oh, that's really great. What else can you tell me? So for, I don't know, the next 30 minutes I was showing her how to rub liver and rub adrenals and, you know, hold here for emotional stress and all sorts of things, you know. She had like a little crash course workshop in the airplane, you know. And it turns out that she was studying neurology at at the Sank Institute, which is a place where people go to learn how to be neurosurgeons and neuro this, that, or the other thing. You know, that's a very high, you know, standard of neurological education, and she was fascinated with it, you know. So maybe one day she'll come back and do some real workshops.